Hey folks, and welcome to the Daily Ratings Podcast. It's a show where each week we'll sit down with Vincent Daly to get his thoughts on the latest movies he's been watching, on both older films and new releases. And don't worry, there's no spoilers. Vince will give a brief review of the movie, share some thoughts, and of course, then rate the film. The daily ratings are always fair, honest, and most importantly, they're consistent. On today's show, Vince will be rating and reviewing The Hobbit from 1977, directed by Jules Bass and Arthur Rankin Jr., Conan the Barbarian by John Milius, Dungeons & Dragons, the 2000 version by Courtney Solomon, Dungeons & Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves by John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein, and finally, Tetris, directed by John S. Baird. It's going to be a great show, folks, so stay tuned and enjoy. Vincent Daly, how we doing, buddy?
How's it going, Tom?
It's going okay for me. How was your week of movies, man?
Fantasy-filled week. Some nerdy shit.
Some nerdy stuff. You surprised me on one of them for sure. Hobbit. It brought a smile to my eye when you did The Hobbit in 1977.
Yeah. That was a rabbit hole too. Finding out about all the different animated ones. I knew there were like animated ones out there, but yeah, this Hobbit one was a trip for sure. The logic being, at least for those first two, I wanted to kind of get films that in some way represent the foundations of what Dungeons and Dragons was first created with. Obviously, Tolkien. You know, I mean, he's the father.
He's huge for that.
Yeah, modern fantasy, basically.
Well, see, Conan the Barbarian surprised me with that thing.
Yeah.
I didn't realize there was things pulled from that.
Yeah, so Conan was a comic serial running since like the 1930s or so.
Okay.
One in Weird Tales, where a lot of different authors and IPs came from. And honestly, from what my research was, Conan the Barbarian was one of like the first influential factors to like original D&D for these tabletop games. So
when did you played a little bit of Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh yeah,
in your time.
I am a D&D nerd.
When did it start? Like when was the game formed?
I want to say late 70s was like first edition.
Okay.
Maybe that's too old. We might be just going to early 80s.
But early 80s was when you see like maybe actual competitions sprouting up and things like that, or
not necessarily competitions, but just D&D groups. Basically, you know, having a dungeon master. We're getting some knee-deep nerdy stuff here.
Yeah, we're not deep yet.
Basically, a dungeon master setting up the scenario for players of the tabletop game to basically role play and find their way through. It's been running ever since. Now on 5th edition and going strong, and clearly, you know, Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro is the companies behind
that's
D&D.
what the edition thing surprises me.
Oh, yeah?
Because I thought so much is like imagination created, and you set your own, like if you're the dungeon master or whatever, you set your campaign with whatever group you're playing with.
Yep.
So, like, I don't even understand the additions.
Sure.
Like added rules?
Better rules. More clear-cut rules.
Okay, all right.
Better designed rules. More player-friendly rules. You know, that's primarily the markers of the different editions of D&D.
Okay.
So much so that the 4th edition, even just being one edition ago, is, you know, referred to as one of the most confusing versions of D&D. Okay. So, but yeah, when it comes to that, these movie choices, I wanted fantasy. And honestly, I really don't regret either of them. Hobbit was a weirdo a little bit, but
yeah. Okay, so let's jump right into it.
Yeah.
Because it was when you texted me, it surprised me. I have never really seen this all the way through.
Yeah.
So I went back and watched some clips of it actually, and kind of went through a little bit. But this is 1977's The Hobbit. Mm-hmm. It's animated, and one thing I did not know when I had watched it in the past, it's a Rankins and Bass film. And Rankins and Bass are the people who did the Santa Claus is Coming to Town. Jack Frost, Frosty the Snowman, like those classic stop motion stuff that like definitely has a soft spot for me.
Yeah.
Growing up with, and they also did The Hobbit.
Yeah. Which is like, why?
I know.
Okay, sure.
So let's get into it. It is The Hobbit. It was an hour and a half, which is also shocking. An hour and a half TV special came out on NBC.
Yep.
Let's get into it a little bit. How did you like it?
I liked it a lot. This was a fascinating watch for me because I couldn't help but play the comparison game of does one movie equal three for Peter Jackson. Like you introduced, this directing duo comes from a lot of TV movie fame and those classic rerun, Christmas movies. They will both go on to direct Return of the King in 1980 after the famous artist Ralph Bakshi takes a shot at creating a cartoon Lord of the Rings in 1978, 1 year after this. And a final notable work of both of their careers being 1982's The Last Unicorn, definitely a gem of non-Disney animation, which I would love to cover sometime. And animation is where I want to start with this one. Yeah. The look of this film belongs to the much rougher style of the 70s and early 80s animation. Personally, I've always found this era to be very ugly, like very just like gross to look at.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a little weird, and it's different because it's not so much of those Christmas claymation stuff or the stop motion things.
Right.
It's a Japanese company that did the animation as well.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It's interesting that you say gross or something like that.
I think they're like intentionally ugly sometimes.
Yeah. It is rougher though. Everything is rougher drawings. It's rougher coloring and yeah.
Absolutely. And folks at home, understand this is all pre-Don Bluth. This is certainly before Disney Renaissance in the 90s. I'm talking anime movies or animated movies like Fritz the Cat, Heavy Metal, Wizards, but probably the most mainstream application of this style is of course Schoolhouse Rock. If you really have to pinpoint that, I don't think anything, and Schoolhouse Rock is done early 70s, but I think that's defining a lot of alternative non-Disney animation at the time, and this Hobbit movie is definitely a byproduct of that. So the style, if I have to describe it, if it's not, these examples aren't bringing a good image to mind, I think it's really just defined by awkward shapes to characters and often very odd movement animation as well. I would just kind of describe it as a little bit of lack of polish, but that lack of polish is exactly why I wanted to see this film, because if anything, the Jackson Hobbits were so plug and play from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I really was excited to see, okay, let's just no even reference material. They're just going off the book.
Off the book. Yeah.
So what do they come up with? So,
and surprising, there's a lot of comparisons in ways that you can see from back then to what they pulled for the movies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So The Hobbit is, of course, the children's tale Tolkien wove together around the land of Middle-earth. And instead of naturally stretching it into 3 blockbuster movies, I'm looking at you, Jackson, it is in one tight package, much like the book. More so than anything, I was fascinated to see a different take on Middle-earth itself, especially since Peter Jackson sways the stylistic vision of the franchise so heavily, in a good way. I mean, our Lord of the Rings special was a delight to watch those films. Yeah. But he has defined visually what we associate with Middle-earth. So that was, this being animated, that being, a kind of a fantasy background. That's where I was coming into a lot of interest when watching this film. The story here is identical, covering the entirety of The Hobbit, from Bilbo Baggins reluctantly departing the Shire to the journey to reclaim the dwarves' lost gold from Smaug the dragon. And I can happily say in an hour and 30 minutes is plenty of time to tell this story. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of awkward jumping around from story to story. It covered the bases. I was just like, oh man, why did those need to be 3 movies?
It does cover it. It's shocking.
Yeah.
You wouldn't expect it. You would expect it to be, I don't know, kind of looser or just gloss over things. But when I was like, again, I didn't watch the whole thing, but watching it, I was like, this is impressive. This is getting some information across.
Yeah.
This is hitting the things it needs to in the books.
Yep.
And like even in the beginning, it gets going and covers the stuff, the same things that Jackson's movies does.
Yeah.
but just better, just quick, well, quicker.
Yeah, quicker. Certainly no weird 60 frames per second, awkward problems. If anything, the visual presentation of both of these kind of have interesting problems. But interesting on the animated side, this Hobbit has a lot of music. We, of course, get the Dwarven singing, but also a soundtrack of a lot of narrating lyrics, kind of constantly talking over scenes. I can't say it's great, but the musical stylings are all over the place too. We get a lot of kind of generic fantasy music, harp stringing. Then there's also like a Jim Croce folk song. And then to the extreme, the goblin sequence, it has like goblin disco. There's like a straight up goblin disco drum beat behind it, hi-hat heavy and everything. So it's out there. It's definitely a product of the 70s. We've talked about this almost like how we can talk about, the campiness of the 90s or the over the topness of 80s. This music, this grooviness of the 70s, especially late 70s, is on display here. Also, couldn't understand why they call Bilbo Burglar the entire film. They just call him Burglar. They don't call him Bilbo. And he's under like an agreement with the dwarves, but it's just always calling him Burglar. I just felt it was just an odd choice.
No, I think that's more to the text.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Does he not get that buddy with the dwarves?
No, he does, but they're not saying that, they're not necessarily saying burglar in such a bad way.
Right.
But it's more so that's his
job.
Role. That's his position, kind of.
They definitely do. And they send him off and go burglar,
Yeah, it's kind of how it is. Yeah. It's like me being on the job site. No one knows my name. They just say painter. They just scream painter and they know someone's going to come.
Right.
But I think that's actually pretty more closer to text. Not that Bilbo isn't used in text, of course it is in the book, but burglar's used a lot.
Interesting. Another kind of, again, I don't know what to encapsulate these criticisms, just odd choices, I guess. Also, whenever Bilbo puts on the ring, it puts on like this slide whistle sound effect, which is so drastically different of what that ring represents. And I definitely understand in The Hobbit, it's not supposed to have the gravity. It's supposed to be kind of almost back of the mind as far as the One Ring. But there's just this slide was like, whoop. Yeah,
it's very Rankin and Bass, I would say.
Yeah.
Meant for kids. For
exactly.
Sure. A kiddish tone to it.
Yeah.
Which The Hobbit was intended to be a kid's book. It was written as a kid's book.
Absolutely.
But it is funny to see after knowing that what we have. It's funny to go back to this for sure.
Yeah. It's so silly. But you really do make a great point, and that's what I'm walking away with this film with, is that this is a great depiction of the children's tales that The Hobbit is.
Mm-hmm.
We're not into that serious stuff. On a big positive, Gandalf is amazing in this. He feels like a total weirdo, but also a true otherworldly wizard. Right from the start, too, he just steals scenes, much like Ian McKellen. He's just, and I guess that's just proof that he really is just a phenomenal character.
Yeah.
Gandalf will also, get some specific praise animation-wise as well from me. His warning to Bilbo in the beginning has this awesome lightning effect that comes over it, which made me wonder, that shadow effect that we see in when it's used in The Lord of the Rings, it's also ripped off in Jackson's Hobbit. If they pull that, if there's different interpretations of Gandalf's kind of eminence, his presence.
Yeah, when he kind of does that, I don't want to say party trick, but when he does that and there gets most people would know it in the Fellowship of the Ring, where he gets angry with Bilbo.
Yep.
In the Hobbit hole, kind of, and that dark storm and everything like that. Again, detailed in the books.
Yep.
Detailed in the book, so it is a thing. Did they pull it from the film? Did they just go from the text?
Yeah.
It's funny though, again, to see the parallels.
Yeah. I just enjoyed a lot of the different presentations, and honestly, in my opinion, the greatest moment of the film is when Gandalf uses his sword Glamdrine, which is animated in such a blinding light. It really switches it up visually and just has some great. It's just a great moment in the short film. Again, going back to that special, my praise for the Lord of the Rings universe is that there is magic, of course, but the magic is always, I don't know, it's tied to something not earthly, but it's tied to elements around the magic wielder.
Like interwoven within the nature and the earth itself.
Yep.
Definitely.
And this scene is a great example of that, so it's just really on a high.
That's cool.
That.
I didn't know that they kind of like make lamb drink a little bit more special. That's cool because like that sword should be treated that way. Like, it's like big history behind that thing.
Yeah.
Cool.
There's a lot of good moments there, and again, all of this is in credit to the original text too. The dwarves, on the other hand, are so revoltingly ugly.
Yeah, there's some that are just weird. Like the forehead design.
I know, what is it?
I have no idea.
They're not Klingons. Like they're like, what is this?
They do look like little Klingons.
It just made me laugh so much the entire time that Warner Brothers was trying to make one of them hot and have a love interest as well. Where like in this depiction, it's like no. Some are shorter than Bilbo. You know, it's terrible. But I think I bring this up because if this is going to be an example of what I mentioned with this late 70s, early 80s animation, the dwarves is what I would point to. So, like I said, this movie tells all three of Jackson's Hobbits in one cartoon, and honestly does a decent job at it. I would say it's hard for me to judge the missing pieces that might be skipped over in the hour and 30 runtime, but it makes up for it in pacing. I think there is a give and take, that the pacing was snappy. We're just moving on and to little story and little segment to segment. So I think in a world where the new movies don't exist, this captures The Hobbit for what it truly is, a fantasy bedtime story. We're going to go ahead and give The Hobbit 1977 a 65.
Wow. Okay, that's. I would have lost all my money had I bet.
Really? You thought much lower or much higher?
Yeah, again, because I have seen part of it before in the past and just kind of returned to it a little bit this week. It's really long to watch that kind of animation style.
True.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
You think of the Rake into Bass Christmas stuff, which like these stories are 15, 20, half an hour, maybe 40 minutes, some of them. They're much shorter, and especially with this animation style, it's just a long time to be watching something like that. I thought this would have been doomed for the 30%.
Oh, really?
So I love that. Wow. I'm shocked that you liked it this much.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a good time.
That's awesome.
Again, like I led off with, not the prettiest cartoon, but it's kind of ugly, but there was a lot done to tell The Hobbit, and I don't know. I mean, if anything, I was saying, do I really put this higher than some of the Hobbit films? And especially that last one, I think so.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
Battle of Five Armies. I mean, that's fluff, that's nothing,
That was a bad movie.
Yeah.
Okay, 65 for the animated Hobbit of 77. So that's so cool. Had a budget for $3 million as well.
Really?
Yeah, I wonder if there was ever any talk of returning to this TV special where an hour and a half special. They tried to do it with Star Wars, like the Star Wars Christmas special.
Oh, sure.
Which is like legendary.
Infamous.
Joke. But very cool. Okay. So check it out. Was it easy to find, by the way?
Very easy. On HBO Max. So
it's on HBO Max.
Yeah.
I should have just went on that then when I know.
Yeah, but because Warner Brothers owns the owns Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
But we'll see if we go to the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings and then they return for Return of the King.
You're teaching me now.
Yeah.
On some of the early stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I would love for us to both watch it, but it feels like we should have put that in the special in some way.
Literally, maybe this Hobbit should have went in the special.
Yeah. But hey, it is what it is. So
we'll crack at it. Then.
Interesting little sections of a film industry. I mean, this TV movie. These are animated directors that
big time directors doing a big time story.
Exactly, but wouldn't really cover in a normal circumstance because of that TV movie aspect. So that excites me a little.
Yeah, and what's crazy to even think that this came out in the 70s, which was approaching 50 years ago.
Yeah,
when this came out in 77, it was already 45 years after the book came out,
right,
or something around that 45, 44 years.
Yep.
Crazy. But okay, all right. So that was 77. Let's move on to 1982's Conan the Barbarian. We're now in rated R 2 hour plus with our boy Arnie. And how was kind of getting into Conan Barbarian, and maybe give us those bridges to this and Dungeons and Dragons if you could a little bit.
So yeah. So an original inspiration source for D&D, and I don't know this for sure. That came from a little bit of research. Obviously, Conan is a very old fantasy IP, so it makes sense that it would play into designing a tabletop game around an adventuring party, fighting monsters. You know what I mean? That's kind of foundational stuff there. It's interesting though, because I've never seen these movies, despite this being one of, Arnie's most famous, one of earliest as well. So the original Conan was found in the fantasy and horror pulp fiction magazine Weird Tales, and a very long-running history. Conan has a rich world that lends itself to great lore building, and I would say, and I believe pretty strongly, especially after this week, lore building, world building, that is a key component to great fantasy. We're establishing a dictionary. Action, it's location. Sci-fi, it's tech. Fantasy, I think it's the lore building. It's getting enveloped in the world, and I think Conan has a lot that it's pulling from itself to create its kind of blended fantasy barbarian world. Our introduction to Conan and who he grows up to be is fantastic. This story has a nice build up to see why he is a legend and what choices shape the hero. I would say this is best summarized in the quote, Conan, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentations of their women. I wasn't going to do the Arnie impression. I was trying it all day. I wasn't going to pull it out, but that's a great quote. And honestly, Conan's journey eventually does kind of slot into a typical revenge tale, but seeing him grow, it's exactly why I like Fellowship the most. Just going back to Lord of the Rings, I like the rising action. I like getting to know who we are and a couple challenges of who our heroes are. And this movie, this first Conan, is so good for that reason. It's also not too dissimilar from 2022's The Northman. A lot of the mythos, a lot of the lore. That's
an interesting comparison,
yeah. And especially how it boils down to a revenge plot, ultimately.
Yeah.
So it was interesting watching this post-Northman. That rising action, though, it shows Conan grow into much more of a fleshed out and a highlight of fantasy protagonists, fantasy heroes, and I think I really did enjoy so much of what this film has as kind of a start to the story. As one of the earliest roles for Arnold, it is incredible to see him take shape as well. Nearly every scene you see him having a good time. He's smiling. He's having a great time on set. At first, I kind of wrote it down. I was like, why is this guy smiling so much? I wrote it down kind of as a criticism, but by the end, he felt so alive. It really felt like the character was alive. There was a simpletonness to Conan that he was just having a fun time hacking heads off, and I don't know, I kind of liked it for that reason.
What's weird is I can see Arnie selling that too.
Yeah,
exactly. Just being him, yeah.
Oh yeah, he gets
especially
so
like early
many
80s
falls.
him,
He's
too.
just like, It's great. It's a soundboard for Arnie for sure. Yeah, I just think that the seeds of his stardom are really set in a good way here. He's, of course, acted in things before Conan, but I think everyone will agree that Conan really is the first big mark for Arnold.
Yeah, 82 is pretty early for him.
Yeah.
When does Terminator come out?
84.
Okay, yeah.
And then also same year as Conan the Destroyer, which is a sequel to this.
Okay.
So, but yeah, still early, maybe not earliest, though. Above all else, I think, and like I alluded to a little bit, in the beginning of this, I think this seriously works in creating a wonderful fantasy world that is interesting to explore and not copied or imitated. I would describe this as low fantasy, as there's very little magical or mystical aspects to it. And it gives the audience such a cool mix of nomadic, Viking, and Mongolian styles to kind of make a barbarian world, which I feel is different than a lot of fantasy.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I just really enjoyed it, and
I'm surprised. I just thought this was always more cheesier than what I'm getting from you from it, because I've never seen it.
There are some jokes, but again, it's kind of tied into Conan and his crew having a good time,
right.
Not following any rules and just killing who they want to kill. I wish the Northmen had more fun like this, honestly. So it's that lore building that is so solid, and like I said earlier, I think it's key to why this works as a good fantasy and its own IP. My favorite being the Enigma of Steel, connected to Conan's god Crom, showing how men are given purpose by the blade. I really did enjoy that aspect there, and I'll probably be stealing it for maybe a D&D campaign in the future. The Enigma of Steel, that's just great. Let's talk about some good campiness, James Earl Jones introduced as our villain Thulsa Doom, a heretical leader with a ridiculous haircut. Can you pull up? You see this?
Yeah, I was looking at it.
Who did that to my man? Who did that? It's a bit silly, but I'm always happy to see Darth Vader as other bad guys, and he really does a great job. His introduction is an amazing scene. He basically is beheading the people of Conan's tribe without any expression on his face. He just has these after effect blue eyes, a goofy haircut, and he's just beheading people. And I loved it. I loved it. I thought it was like a wonderful scene, and talk about a dynamite introduction to a villain.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, a brief but solid role for Max von Sydow as King Osiric, similar to him kind of acting in Flash Gordon 2 years earlier, which in itself is a serial comic, old IP. So I enjoyed seeing him here in this, and maybe further exploration of what they were doing in the 90s to dive more into these other IPs. I don't know how many are there. I guess Tintin's one of them. I don't know.
That's interesting. We could go through that.
These like old pre comic book,
right?
Little magazine things. So we get a great soundtrack and score, very brassy, very glorious. Set design and costume is fantastic, specifically armor and helmets. Let me tell you, I was in love with the armor here. Especially we were talking off the podcast not too long ago about some of the extra and some of the armor design in Rings of Power. Yeah. How that was a little disappointing.
Yeah.
Man, this couldn't be an opposite example of that.
That shocks me, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Shocking me too.
I was just thinking it's a Schwarzenegger action.
Yeah.
They're in costumes running around.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool to hear.
But it was really good. So I would say combat is decent. This is really going to be where this 80s-ness, and no less early 80s-ness, is kind of worn on its shoulder. I don't know if the choreography was really stellar. However, I did love the gore. It might look a bit cartoonish in spots, but the splashes of blood and the multiple beheadings was just so much fun to watch, and it was such a, you could tell it was such a fun production. If anything, sold by Arnold grinning as he gets blood splashed on his face, hacking into someone. I think it captured some of the chaoticness of his character being a barbarian, and that gore was right there to meet it. Like I said, this is very 80s. This has been a very raving review so far, but it is a very, very 80s movie, so much so that I would say a lot of people could be turned off by this for how 80s it is. I mean, from dated action sequences, abundance of sex sequences, and everyone having just puffy permed hair, perfect metal arena rock hair. It's just like, what is going on here? This is one thing that didn't make sense in the fantasy that they were trying to put on screen. And there might be a style that hangs over the substance of the film, but all of it is used as ammunition for creating lively characters, Conan most of all. We're going to go ahead and give Conan the Barbarian 1982 a 70 on the dot.
Wow, that's really good score.
It was a good flick.
Okay, these are both very surprising to me. Yeah. Because 70 is a pretty damn good score, really.
Yeah. And real talk, Conan gets some hate online. People think it's just this like 80s, kind of
schlock, just like me. That's how
right. But I'm telling you, there was some the love behind the production. I think as a fantasy watch this week, I was all right at home.
Wow, okay, very cool.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
I don't know how I didn't see our next film either, but I've sure heard a lot about our next film. We're going to move on. This is 2000s. This is Dungeons and Dragons. And I think we just need to get into it. I'm sure you have some on this film as well, why it was made or what the deal is, but
right.
Let's get into it. So it's 2000. It's PG-13, an hour and 47 minutes. It's Dungeons and Dragons. How did we like it?
Yeah, where do I even begin with this one? I'll come right out and say, this is a terrible movie. And often this Dungeons and Dragons from 2000 will circulate online as a so bad it's good on lists online, either for its disgusting CGI, and I really mean disgusting, or laughable acting. It's possible that maybe in a certain viewing, you can see this is so bad it's good. I honestly would argue it's more of a soulless 90s fantasy film, and for how cookie cutter nearly all the aspects are, it really isn't so bad it's good. It's not even enjoyable.
It's just bad.
Yeah, exactly. It's just bad. And I mean top to bottom bad. So
usually I really like Jeremy Irons in it.
We will get to Irons. He's so good, but unfortunately, he's also a little bad as well, surrounded by a lot of bad.
So with this film, the whole purpose was, I'm assuming, the game was like, it had its popularity. So let's grab this IP and let's make a movie of it.
Absolutely. I feel like a lot of 90s films were trying to do that.
Does it feel very like Y2K too? It just feels like Y2K schlock?
Marlon Wayans definitely feels Y2K.
Okay.
So, he's doing like this discount Chris Tucker scream. Like his character is basically exclusively screaming as his comedy to it. So, and yes, this is a comedy of all things. So it's really weird. Usually I mention the director to give recognition and see if there's some kind of stylistic threads. That is not the case here. Courtney Solomon has directed 3 films. All are trash. Okay. And this movie seems to be the start of it. So I just don't know how... I bring it up because I just don't know how a man has a career after so many things like this. Some real stinkers. But our story is about an evil wizard named Profion that wants to wield a staff to control all dragons. A defiant princess opposes his desire for power, which causes him to send a henchman after the staff that introduce 4 unlikely heroes that make up our D&D party, stumbling into collecting the staff as... at first for riches, but then finding a greater purpose for their quest. I'm rolling my eyes here. It's really not great. It's not even great in the possibility of what D&D could be. I feel like it's just like, all right, they had the CGI to do a bunch of dragons, and that was the pitch.
Right. Yeah.
That was it. The world is high fantasy, not so much for its magic, but that you should be stoned out of your mind as a requirement to watch this film. Oddly enough, it is a comedy, though. Marlon Wayans, like I said, is hired exclusively to scream. And our A plot is a kind of a sword-fighting, swashbuckling comedy adventure. And the B plot is dragon politics. Oh, joy.
Really?
It's terrible.
Like an early Game of Thrones, but just absolutely garbage.
Right, absolutely garbage. Absolutely garbage. This movie is like a lot of things. Believe it or not, I would say the closest this movie is to something like an Aladdin, because Jeremy Irons' character is like a Jafar. He has a defiant princess that he has to get around to his schemes to work, And I guess, again, I think these cookie cutter aspect, it's all over this film. You'll watch it and you can spot something from another film.
It seems bold. It certainly seems like a bold vision, maybe.
You're rooting for this one. It's bold, all right. It's bold in a different way. I would say, sadly, there is very, very little redeeming this experience. And like I said, why I feel it fails to be Spig. So bad it's good. But why I think it is, maybe saved from even a lower score. And a very big one is Jeremy Irons as the evil wizard Profion. He is so goddamn entertaining in this. Irons is the whole ham. He is a full sit-down dinner of acting his ass off. To the point that I would take an entire movie of this character. I mean, he is just
He's so good. Yeah. He just steals the scenes.
Right. Not that anyone's trying to steal him away. Right. He's just taking first prize by default.
He's so good at selling his characters. Like, I don't know what it is. He's so compelling. Like, he's great to watch.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. I mean, I'm not joking. This is the most comical, mustache-twirling, over-the-top bad guy ever put on film, I think. You look at a single scene of Jeremy Irons, and you will see an actor bathing in camp. He's bathing in it.
Let me see if I can go ahead and draw a comparison, maybe.
Sure.
Not having seen this. This Jeremy Irons character compared to the bad guy in Wild Wild West.
Ooh, close.
Okay.
Where we're definitely within striking range.
Just so I know what we're dealing with here. That's all. Okay.
I would say, oof, that's good.
Pretty good, huh?
That's good. Maybe we add in a little bit of Jim Carrey Joker from Batman Forever,
Ooh.
and that's the mix.
That's the mix. Okay. That's how we get.
Also, all kind of around the same time a little bit. So. Yeah, an object of power in the scene, he's caressing it on his face. Someone opposes him, he shows his teeth and grips his fists in the air. Folks, I say in full sincerity, Jeremy Irons has almost the ability to save this film, but cannot. I will pay handsomely for a fan edit of just him for my personal collection.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. If that's how you want to produce, I'm more than happy to take that as the donation. So. But sadly here, there's almost countless problems with this movie. I'm going to try to breeze through these because, again, let's
just bullet them out.
Yeah, there's countless problems. The CGI looks like it's processed on a PS1. On the dragons specifically, you can just see how they're like a bunch of pudgy spheres put together. Like the dragons look so terrible. And like I said, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine the elevator pitch for this is, we can put on 20 to 30 dragons on screen as ones. And they go, okay, what's an IP with dragons? Well, that's probably how they came across this.
I don't know. Maybe this could have just been, again, Y2K. Tech is out, and George Lucas is trying to take the crown with that. So we have reboot of Star Wars going on.
Oh, sure. Episode 1's coming out.
We have Lord of the Rings being made already while this is being made.
Yep.
We have Pirates of the Caribbean being made while this is being made. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is the birth of that early blockbuster CGI.
Yep. But
they tried to get
a bad
on
one.
Yeah. They tried
an ugly child.
Tried to get on the train. Didn't happen.
Without a doubt, some of the worst looking blood I have ever seen. I mean, this unironically looks like the ooze from the Power Rangers movie 5 years earlier.
Wow.
And is trying to be serious. It's not like purple ooze. It's supposed to be like blood. The set itself is a 0 out of 10. I mean, some of the cheapest things I've ever seen. Some of the design here, especially the look of certain monsters from D&D at this time. I mean, maybe there's some slight credit there for, I don't know, capturing the specific brand of D&D, but I'm not kidding. Some of the shit looks like it's out of Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Wow.
It looks like it's out of Props.
Wow.
I'm not joking.
I'm loving these callbacks.
Yeah. This one was built. I was also struggling writing this one because it's like, where do I start? Yeah, where do I start? Most of the creatures look like bad leftovers from Star Trek makeup, and shows that I think they could probably they probably thought they could get away with a television level production that really just seeps into all of what's bad with this, as far as it being a comedy sometimes, a drama at other times, and this kind of fantasy thing whole wrapped up. I will say it's not unlike the new one. The new one juggles a lot of balls in the air.
Okay.
But I
now,
feel...
don't you think that's inherent? That's almost... It's the Achilles heel of making a movie like this, because the whole thing about Dungeons and Dragons is it goes batshit crazy.
Sure.
At any turn.
Yeah.
And the rules are crazy, and your game can go forever. And you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It is something. I feel it's in the sauce. Okay.
It's trying for sauce. But yeah, I think you bring up a good point though, in that a D&D game is about improv. It's about kind of a ragtag type of plan.
Yeah, you don't want
put together.
You don't want it to be tame.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's just this one is something else. Folks, this is a hard pass, and sadly does not come close to a So Bad It's Good nomination. Little is done to give a nod to the tabletop game, and even less is given to competent filmmaking. We're going to go ahead and give Dungeons and Dragons 2000. Oh, I think that's a 13.
A 13%. Really?
On the D20. No.
Wow. Yeah, that sound that you just heard, by the way, was a 20-sided die. Being audio only.
No visuals.
A 13%.
Yeah.
That's one of the worst films that we've ever reviewed, Vin.
Yeah, it's real bad.
13% is really bad.
I could go on almost an hour of just dissecting this film, but that's,
and that's with an amazing Jeremy Irons.
Yeah, for real. That's where I say, I mean, Jeremy Irons probably saves this from below, a single-digit score, basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is some of the, definitely. Bottom 10, I would say.
Yeah.
I think bottom 10.
Yeah. It's bad.
Folks, Dungeons & Dragons, 13%.
Stay away from it.
Do not waste your time.
I mean, maybe watch a highlight reel of Irons. That's about it. That is about it.
Wow. Okay, that's terrible. We'll move on from that. Folks, we just want to remind you, we're going off the value for value model here. So are you getting value in the website, checking it out? Are you getting value listening to the podcast? If you could, you go to thedailyratings.com, you head to the donations tab, and through monetary support, you become a producer of the Daily Ratings, and you show us what value you're getting. So you go ahead, pick any number you want, whether it's a set number that we have, whether it's a reoccurring donation, whatever specific number for whatever reason that you want. You send it our way, you write it a note, and we're going to read the note here too. Whether it's questions, comments, critiques, love, hate, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's if you're going to take the time to send us some cash, go ahead and write a note. We're going to read it here.
And we want to hear from you more than anything.
We really do. We really want to hear from you. We want to have this open dialogue with you. Again, the more we grow, the more content rich this segment of the podcast is going to get. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be really fun. I think people are going to be
absolutely
into kind of listening to it. So anyway, that's how we kind of do it. It's dailyratings.com. Again, at the donations tab. I'll just remind everybody again, sign up for the newsletter down at the bottom of the site. You just go put in your first name and your email. You'll just be asked to confirm that. And then you'll be good to go. And the newsletter is going to be coming out on a weekly basis. It's a great way to start out the week. Again, we're not going to try to just pitch things to you or try to get you to whatever, get money from you or sell products for you. No, it's interesting, fun stuff that I think it's just going to be a joy to kind of take 10 minutes and go through. A good way to start the week. That might have some issues with it, so it'll come out about 2 weeks or something like that. Other than that, thank you so much for those of you who have produced the Daily Ratings. Don't forget, another way to just be a producer is get us out there. If you hear a conversation going on about movies, go ahead and get us in the conversation. That's where we want to be. That's kind of what I always say. So thank you so much. And with that, Vin,
I did want to give the little ending note from last week, if that's cool with you.
Oh yes, okay, yes. Last week you had something to say, and you said we'll save it for this week.
Yeah.
So this goes now. Okay.
So this was around a Dungeons and Dragons trailer, and I would say an interesting trend I've been noticing trailers when I've had the patience to watch them.
Yeah.
Is there's a lot more text on screen from critics. This is a trend that I think is coming back.
Really?
It's just shy of a voiceover saying the text in like a voiceover type of
The New York Times says
exactly
right,
but they're still on text on screen, and there was a lot of bullshit, but one caught my eye for a very specific reason, and it said a thrilling ride that begs to be seen. Tell me, what the hell does that mean? What does a movie begging to be seen entail?
That means that film is so good.
It's begging.
It's begging for you to see it.
So I kicked that around. I think that's a great way to explain it. But Tom, I think I want to install a buzzer, a bullshit buzzer that you will have on your side of the table.
Okay.
That if you ever hear something come out of my mouth that doesn't track or anything like that, you hit the buzzer and you can tell me to maybe let's go over it one more time, or maybe let's try that.
Okay, I think we can make that work. Something like that.
I don't want it.
Okay.
I don't want the drum roll.
Maybe my phone going off in the background with that would help. So you just want me to call BS? You want me to hit the buzzer BS?
I want If
I hear some
anything that doesn't mean anything.
Okay, that's good. Okay.
And the example is a movie that begs to be seen. I have no idea what that means.
Okay, so I'll make sure to keep you honest.
Yeah.
Make sure you're not too big for your britches.
Yeah.
Make sure you're not trying to just give us some critic bullshit.
Right. Something like that. Because that's when you know that's a problem. So.
That's good. That'd be fun to keep our eye out for some too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it gets a better product. I can laugh at myself if I do say something up my own ass like that. But
what was the one from Maverick? It wasn't text on screen, but the one commercial. The narrating voice was something like you'll leave the theater high-fiving your friend or something like that.
Bingo. Another one from this D&D one was a crowd pleaser that actually pleases.
Oh, that's so stupid.
Dumb. dumb.
That's so dumb.
Stop talking like that. That's not valuable as a critic.
Yeah, and also stay away from these critics. Like every single Rotten Tomato verified critic or whatever that is. These guys that just try to get one-liners. Those guys' wet dream
is being on that trailer.
Is to be on that trailer. Yep. Exactly right. That's really funny. No, I'll try to point that out to you.
Yeah, you can keep me honest. I think that's an important thing to do. I want to keep it real.
Okay, that sounds good to me.
All right, but
we have newly released.
Yeah, we can get back to
Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. Which Honor Among Thieves? Correct me if I'm wrong. That was an Uncharted game.
Yeah.
It's Uncharted 2, Honor Among Thieves.
Yeah, it's also a line in the 2000s Dungeons and Dragons. So I don't know if it's a callback. Most likely, it's just the start of a cinematic universe.
Oh, wonderful! Great. Okay, so how did we like the newly released Dungeons and Dragons films? I'm conflicted.
Okay.
So
wait, you saw it?
No.
Oh, okay. You were about to surprise me.
I'm on the verge of maybe want to go see it because I love Chris Pine.
Okay.
Love Chris Pine.
Fair.
However, what's her face is in this, and I hate her.
Michelle Rodriguez.
I hate Michelle Rodriguez.
Yep, I'm right there with you.
Let's just go ahead and get into it. How did you like it?
Yeah, so I think this movie has basically a lot of little positives. I just don't know if those little positives add up to a good movie. That's where I'm kind of conflicted with this. John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein are a director duo that did Vacation in 2015 and then also Game Night in 2018. There's a lot of hype around Game Night. I've never seen it, but this duo seems to be going after some sort of kind of Guardians of the Galaxy vibe where these are ragtag characters, equally funny and emotional, put against blockbuster stakes. That's kind of the, if I did give a skeleton structure of what this film feels like. Mm-hmm. The story is a kind of a distracted zigzag journey to get Chris Pine's daughter away from all sorts of evil, including charlatans and powerful warlocks alike. While he starts with only one loyal companion, Michelle Rodriguez, a barbarian in his group, the adventuring party grows to include many D&D classes to try to kind of slap together a heist plan to take back his daughter. And that's basically our setup here. Let's start with some positive as, like I said, I think there's a lot of little nice touches. Some for fans, some just plain good. But I'm almost at a little bit of an indecisive moment of if it really does add up into a good movie on its own for that. This is about as high fantasy as you can get. Magic, mystical races, artifacts, monsters, it has it all. I really appreciate the variety of fantasy races here, a big highlight being non-humanoid characters and not always CGI either. We have some good puppet work, which I enjoy, and maybe as a byproduct coming off of Mandalorian and things like that. So enjoy seeing that. Of course, some great creature shout-outs for anyone that is even remotely familiar with the tabletop game is instantly recognizable on screen. We, of course, have the Mimic, the Displacer Beast, Gelatinous Cube. There's some really good shout-outs here, and they're used in very creative ways. The rules of the monster are pretty much identical to what they are in the tabletop game, and how that's used in fun, creative ways for problem solving with the party. That was a big highlight for me. I enjoyed that. I would say the druid of their party, played by Sophia Lillis, she was the girl from It and a few other horror films, has a great sequence with the spell Wild Shape. She's a druid, so she can transform into these animals. Quintessential animal is the owl bear.
Yes, this is the one that's been most talked about.
Yep. And she can transform in anything from a worm, a rat, a hawk, at her will, basically. And honestly, it was probably my favorite sequence out of the whole film, dedicating to this wild shape. She has to kind of escape, and she's going into various different things, various different forms. And it was a good look. It was a good sequence. And once again, I think true to, anyone that's played a druid wants to wild shape into an animal that can kick ass. So it was a fun moment for the film, and true to it. I would say the script also makes a lot of conscious effort to make D&D jokes and memes you would hear in real life around the table playing with friends.
That's cool. It's nice to hear that maybe these writers really knew what they were doing or understood the game really well.
Absolutely. There's some shout outs to other type of community content creators in the D&D community.
Right.
There's a lot there done to obviously the story isn't about a bunch of nerds in a basement sitting around a table and role-playing. It is going the extra step, though, to try to tell some jokes around the game itself, if you will.
You know what's funny about this is what I wanted out of the Uncharted movie.
Oh, really?
I wanted more care into the writing. I wanted to feel connected to the game for the real fans of what this movie is or why the movie even existed, which was the call from fans to please make this into a movie.
Sure.
So that's nice to hear that some care is being taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. The interaction between the adventuring party as scrappy and chaotic. I'm not in love with the writing here, but there is a real-life improv that defines every D&D campaign, and going off the rails and seeing to how you can slap it together. And once again, this film does have a nod. It tries to capture that a little bit. While these all aspects, I think they definitely add up to a decent fan film, I just don't think this was a great movie, and I'm even one of those fans.
Interesting.
I was able to recognize a lot of these good qualities, and folks at home, this is a perfect example of if what I'm saying is really jiving with you and you are a Dungeons & Dragons fan and you want to see this on screen and come to life, go watch the movie. I just don't know if I can call this a great movie on its own.
So where was it lacking? Where was just things lackluster, basically?
Definitely all writing. It's all in the writing of these characters, the writing of the jokes, pacing of the film. It was all really where it matters, honestly.
So it had very good nods to the actual game.
Cute little additions, but
execution not there.
Right. Even
not surprising.
In multiples of these cute little nods, I don't think they add up to a great movie. Is where I'm coming from. The first 40 minutes is very clumsy as an intro, and with more exposition that honestly, I could barely even come to pay attention to. Bad writing, I really think plagues the whole experience. There are huge gaps left in the dialogue for laughs that, in my theater specifically, were met with eerie silence. Like the crowd was almost embarrassed for the film. And I wouldn't be laughing anyway. But again, that's one of those moments that I'm thankful for going into a theater experience. And
how packed was your theater? I'm presuming a decent crowd.
Yeah, I saw a really late showing though.
Oh, okay,
so
all right.
It was maybe they were just
a little bit more empty then.
Yeah, maybe they were actually just asleep. And worst of all is it's kind of surprisingly boring. Like I said, that first 40 minutes, it's kind of a little pulling teeth. The movie has a lot of cuts and flashbacks to big action, big battles. Mythical creatures attacking. There's a big battle with a dragon that is shown off. But when we come back from those cuts and flashbacks, the actual action of the main party, the progressing plot, is dedicated to comedy, and it takes a long time for this film to give us actually anything worthwhile. When we're in the real progressing plot with the party. For a while, the film is just bouncing back to those as kind of, they're going to give you what you want in these flashbacks, but then actually what is happening is just all comedy and jokes and, trying to be Marvel kitsch, basically.
I was going to say, it's coming off very Marvel-y.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't stress enough, if there is any comparison to this film, it is probably Guardians of the Galaxy, just in how ragtag the crew is.
I think that's a great comparison.
Yeah, different walks of life, funny, emotional, and then blockbuster stakes. That's kind of the James Gunn triangle, basically. So
it's funny. We have Guardians 3 coming out too next month.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, it's like not tracking well.
Really?
Yeah, they're not expecting too much, I don't think, out of it at this point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. We're seeing the fall of Marvel, maybe. Amen.
Well, diminished returns for sure. But also, I just don't know if an audience is... Maybe the audience is asking for more. Like this probably could have been way better or funnier, and writing has really just taken a hit in big blockbuster Hollywood in general.
Yeah. I think it's the copycat game ultimately. Just how 2000s Dungeons and Dragons was trying to copycat everything 90s. This feels like a very copycat of a lot of blockbusters, and especially down to that bloated title. You can feel it. You can feel it in the air that they're trying to, Hasbro wants that cinematic universe. So, Transformers is all said and done. So, I would say just going back to a little bit of, again, how the editing and how the flashbacks work in it, I would say it makes the main story just really drag, and all while the driving force for the plot, Chris Pine getting his daughter back, gets weaker and weaker as moments go by. Every joke, I cared less about the daughter. And yet, when we get to the daughter, the film really wants to be emotional and really about family. Yeah. You know what I mean? It feels manufactured. Most of all, actors, I would say, are meh to very bad. But I think this falls mostly on the writing. It's not really performances. As much as we joke about Michelle.
Michelle Rodriguez has to be garbage.
She's actually not terrible. You know who's the worst is Hugh Grant. Hugh Grant's definitely the worst.
Really?
Yeah,
that's a shame.
Hugh Grant definitely embodies the out of place jokes as much as possible.
But Michelle Rodriguez can't act. I'm serious.
She does some brawling in this. Oh. She does do some brawling.
Yeah, good. So. She's a good little pit bull. How was Chris Pine?
Chris Pine was all right. I would say it's all meh. But unfortunately, he kind of falls into that joke pitfall again.
Yeah.
So.
He surprises me so much because I watched some of his stuff that he's in, even some of the Star Trek movies.
Yeah.
And I was like, boy, you put any other actor his age at this time in the movie, it would be probably garbage. He's able to sell, I don't know, inherently kind of goofier things or plot lines, which is just like, all right, talk about space stuff here. He sells it.
Yeah.
He's like really good at being high emotion or high intensity or acting like he actually cares, like the character cares.
Yeah.
That's what's impressive to me about him.
And I would say he's, when those emotional beats come, he's good. He's also, I would say, good as kind of a party leader in this. So
that's what I would want to see him.
Keeping everyone together. Yeah, maybe that is hitting on the same shade as, like you said, with the Star Trek movies and whatnot.
Right, yeah.
So, but yeah, I would say most of the time the comedy is out of place. Hugh Grant, again, a great example of this. He's this, he has to be this manipulative rogue operating at a high level, but then proceeds to be just a bumbling idiot in every scene. And it feels like bad character writing. And it wouldn't be a blockbuster without that shoehorned family theming and the friends we made along the way. That's basically, that same type of campiness that's coming out here. So sadly, I think this film is an imitator just like the last one, granted with near infinite more polish, charm, and fan appeal. So don't get spooked. This isn't getting in the teens or anything like that. But like I said already, I mean, you can feel it in the setup of this film. You can feel it in the naming of itself, that very long name. You see the seeds of a cinematic universe being fisted into theaters by Hasbro. We're going to go ahead and give, it's a long title, Dungeons & Dragons, Honor Among Thieves.
Oh boy.
That's a 52.
A 52 on a 20-sided die. Fantastic.
No, we were doing damage die.
Oh, you got the whole... Okay, sorry. I'm writing some down here. Good. All right, 52%. Yeah, I can't say I'm too surprised and not excited to see it now.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's how that is. I don't know. I wasn't excited in the beginning, but again, I thought, what if? You know what I mean?
Sure. Again, I was able to have a good appreciation for this being a fan film. I'm just curious what non-fans think of this, honestly. So
yeah, are non-fans going to see this as, hey, this is a fun, good action family comedy flick? Or
maybe even the introduction to, because this has a lot of rave online. This is people.
Of course it does.
In addition to the schlock that we mentioned with the trailer.
I know, but of course it does.
Yeah.
This film is ripe for that. Just like when Guardians 3 comes out, it's going to do very well on Tomatoes because of the Sony fanboys. Yeah. Or the Marvel, the Marvel fanboys. Yeah,
okay. You got the gun fanboys.
Right.
There's a lot of fanboys. But yeah, I even folks at home, even if you just want to write into us, I'm just curious. If you do end up seeing this movie and not a D&D fan, or if you are, be curious of this one, just because I feel like, again, there was a lot of cuteness. There was a lot of cool nods. I don't know if that's substance,
His execution was bad.
Yeah, I think that's like a fun, okay, nice, but it's a flavor at most.
Yeah. Okay, all right, so that's 52% for Dungeons & Dragons, Honor Among Thieves. Did you know about the celebrity D&D crew?
Oh,
this kind of like this crew that gets together like popular people.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And play D&D?
Mm-hmm.
Who is that?
So some of the names are.
I believe Vin Diesel is a huge D&D fan.
Really?
Yeah, swear to God.
Wow. Okay. So this is not this crew. So apparently there's this celebrity crew that gets together. One of them is Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine.
The guitarist?
The guy who has set it up is Joe Manganiello.
Oh,
He's one of the Magic Mike dancers. I think
yes, and he's been on Critical Role. He's a huge D&D head.
Yeah, huge D&D head,
Yeah.
and of course, not to mention Vince Vaughn is a big D&D guy, and he plays with these guys.
A connective tissue to next week.
Love my Vince Vaughn.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, Vince. So we're going to go ahead into our last film here. I was happy to see this on. I just watched this trailer.
Yep.
And it kind of looked good. It's for Apple TV.
Yep.
It is Apple TV, but it's brand new. It just came out. This is called Tetris. It's by John S. Baird. Let's just get right into it. What made you pick this, and how was it?
I think I picked this just because originally I maybe thought this was going to be paired with Mario, but I needed more new releases this week, so I was like, all right, let me watch it.
Oh, okay, all right.
Let me dive into the hell of Apple TV.
Right, I know. You hate it. You hate it.
Director John S. Baird has a good run of films. I hear great things about the movie Filth from 2013, which has been on my list for a minute now. Even though this was kind of a Apple TV app trigger fight or flight response out of me.
Yep.
I thought this was a good one to add to this week. So being all nerdy and whatnot. The movie tells the journey of taking Tetris worldwide and out of the icy cold grip of the Soviet Union. But good ideas have no borders, and Tetris being one of the biggest games of all time, it cannot be contained. There is a scramblingness. There is a whole slew of players involved and hands in the pot around Tetris, because from the word go, basically, it was something that people understood how addictive it was, how good of a puzzle game it was, and for the time, there wasn't like a huge amount of competition, so it was really revolutionary. We follow real-life game designer Hank Rogers, played by Taron Egerton, in business meetings and car chases alike to secure licensing rights for Tetris. I would loosely put this in a camp with like a sexy finance type of film, like a Moneyball, maybe Social Network. It's about business basically.
Okay.
The film tries to open this up into a little bit more of a kind of a blockbustery way. I think that's a little bit of a misstep for it, but that's the core of this here.
Yeah, it felt like a good serious movie. Oh no!
It's.
And I liked it because it's like the backdrop is like just Tetris.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It seemed like a good. This isn't documentary feel, correct?
No.
This is definitely movie feel.
Yeah, movie feel. Tries to tell a based on a true story type of thing. And like I said, it does kind of lose its way at the end in trying to make a little bit more of a blockbustery feel to it. But I can't blame it because, I don't know, you want the razzle-dazzle. So.
Right. And how captivating can be the origins of Tetris be.
Right. Once they get signed the contract, it's done. Right. You know what I mean? So they gotta give one last push. A lot is riding on Egerton's performance here, and honestly, he brings like a giddy excitement that helps the pacing of the film. I honestly don't know much more about Hank Rogers, just being an old game developer. He brings a lot of excitement to this, and of course, that manic businessman aspect, it plays into what we know the Legend of Tetris to be. So I think it's a good match. He's flying all over the world for just some game, and I think there is a coming truth that we know it's going to be one of the most sold games of all time, basically. Right. Historically, Tetris was skyrocketed in popularity by being bundled with the launch of the original Game Boy. This story has a who's who of recognizable software and hardware companies that make it an interesting throwback. Just how much Nintendo is in this.
Yeah, I bet.
I watched this pretty late in the week, so I couldn't really adjust some of the movies I covered, but it made me want to try to get other Nintendo type of things. There's that old movie, The Wizard, where they see Super Mario 3 for the first time.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to maybe kind of tie that together, but
I like this era of game. Like, I've always been into this era of game stuff. Like, I've always watching documentaries of it.
Yep.
I just like some of the older games, like Galaga.
Yeah. Folks, if you don't know, Tom will wipe the floor floor with you on Galaga.
There's a small chance. There's a small chance of it. I'm not good at many things. I will brag about my Galaga playing, though.
Yeah, he's very good.
But I've always been into it. I don't know if it's like old G4 stuff, if they would do specials on Donkey Kong or something like that. Sure. I don't know. It strikes a certain chord. And this stuff always kind of interests me. Yeah. The origins of Atari, the origins of something like this. You know, it's fun. Pixels, the great Adam Sandler movie, you know? But
unfortunately, that was also maybe close to a watch. As well. But you're so right. And I think this works as one of those kind of semi-business movies because it's the starting of the industry, or it's the early days where there's a lot of excitement. It's the Wild West. Who knows who's going to come out on top?
That is exactly what I was just trying to say, and you summed it up much quicker. It's also why I like the AMC show *Halt and Catch Fire*, which almost no one gives a damn about, but it's a great show.
Yeah, because it's like early programming.
It's early internet, early computers, and just like you said, the Wild West. And now we would look at these machines, and it's so basic and simplistic and whatever, but it is. It's the creation of what this massive thing is going to be. Absolutely. And Tetris just being an early video game. I don't know. Something I've always liked it. I don't know. That's why I was intrigued as soon as I saw this trailer just last night. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, this might be a watch.
Yeah. I think this is a good streaming watch. And if anything, just tying back, that excitement is sold through Egerton's performance. Most of the film operates in high-end business negotiations, with a lot of the conflict being driven by the KGB getting in the middle of everything in Soviet Russia. The business side of this kind of plays off this time capsule well, as the licensing fight is true to life. If there's one thing that is absolutely true to the story, is the licensing struggle over Tetris, as it was a mess, not by a lot of hands in the pot, but more so by the Soviet Union not letting anything go and people having false contracts and it being very messy for how to proceed forward with it. Like any true story, catching the real life aspects is one of the more enjoyable parts. I would say the story does slip into some unrealistic situations for the sake of drama towards the end, but where the film was working, where I think it's a good streaming watch, is exactly in this, kind of spotting the real history to the film.
Yeah.
So the conflict introduced by the KGB feels very manufactured, though, and where otherwise this true story gets a bit cartoonish. Especially towards the end, it feels like the film wants to have a bombastic finale. Honestly, it's where it got a little bit weaker for me. I totally understand how, a streaming film, no less, to maybe cut through the noise needs a razzle-dazzle. And it's tempting to inject that into a story, but I feel the subject material had enough to survive on its own because Tetris is legendary, There's a cute 8-bit art style all over this film, especially for scene and setting transitions. Basically, anytime they jump in location, and he jumps a lot in location, he's a very manic businessman. He flies everywhere. They're all handled through a pixel aesthetic.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I would say most of the time this works. Sometimes I feel like it wasn't varied enough. I felt like they were just kind of reusing a lot of stuff. Yes, he does go back to those locations, but I don't know. It just felt like I wanted a little bit more out of this pixel aesthetic.
Okay.
Because I thought it was a good highlight of the film. Overall, I'm kind of coming away with this film saying there's really much worse you can watch and spend your time with on streaming. I just wish this one kind of picked a lane in its presentation. True story on the biopic of a game, or this international escape adventure. Either way, we have yet another middle-of-the-road offering for streaming, and maybe a tipping point for you getting that Apple TV subscription. We're going to go ahead and give Tetris a 60 on the dot.
Okay, 60% for Tetris. I think I'm going to watch it. I think it might scratch that itch.
Yeah.
Of that early internet, early game stuff kind of itch.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I like that. And, I have Apple free for a little bit. And
really?
Watch Severance. Really like Severance.
Live it up.
There is some good stuff on there. I think they lack most in movie. Like, I think their shows are really good.
Sure.
I think they're lacking on the movie department.
Yeah,
This might be the first one I'm actually interested in.
Okay.
So, but okay, that's 60% for Tetris. Vin, looking at this list here, is there anything else you'd like to add? Or are we going to roll credits here?
No, the only thing is I'll say I'm excited for birthday week. I already got a couple films under my belt.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. I'm an early bird, but no, it'll be a fun time.
Yeah, next week, the birthday movies. Very exciting. Very exciting.
Any last minute changes, or is that, it says ironclad.
I texted Vin like the day after that episode came out, and I was just like, I just, for some reason, I thought of these two movies.
Yeah.
Are you going to watch a 6? Are you going to?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I really actually do want to watch Blood Diamond, but I don't.
So
know.
it doesn't matter. We're doing the 4.
Okay.
And then, as we said, if you wanted to do a 5th, if you had time, because on top of the Super Mario coming out, it's either going to be Blood Diamond or Body of Lies. You pick Blood Diamond, but the next day I was just like, I just thought of 2 such better films. That you could choose between, but it doesn't matter. You're probably not going to watch them anyway.
Well, give me. I mean, come on.
I don't think
for next year.
No, okay. So the 2 was the 1944 film Gaslight.
Oh, and you've told me that for a while.
Yeah, I've talked to that. Yeah, I can't believe it wasn't on the birthday thing. But Gaslight basically, because a year ago, Gaslight was used more in the media.
Oh, yeah.
That was like the biggest.
It's a buzzword.
Yeah, if there was like the word bubble thing, the bigger the bubble is when the word was most used in the internet, then it goes on that. So now woke would be there.
Yep.
But gaslight was being so overused and people were using it incorrectly.
Yep.
And the term gaslight, when you still hear it in politics or news anchors, talking heads say it refers to the 1944 film Gaslight.
Right.
Because the idea is, I believe the premise is, a man wants to collect the life insurance on his wife, doesn't want to commit the murder, so he wants to drive her insane by having her commit suicide.
Gaslighting her.
Right. And the thing is, and the whole idea of gaslight in modern day politics is you saying something happened or didn't happen, or saying something is a certain way when it's so clearly the opposite.
Right.
So one of the ways that this guy would make his wife crazy slowly is, for instance, back when people were using actual gas lighting to light their homes, he would say, you already turned the gas light off at the top of the steps or something like that. But really, she didn't.
Messing with her.
And it would just slowly drive her crazy. So that, because it was topical.
Yep.
Again, we talked about it a year ago because it was more.
It is on a list. I will get to it eventually.
Oh, okay. It was more topical back then. And then it just had to be because like John Wick was on my mind or something like that. But the Replacements with Keanu Reeves and the great Gene Hackman that was in Replacements. That's why Replacements was on my mind. There was photos that came up of Gene Hackman, like he's still alive. He's like 93, I think. And people just like, the first time we saw Gene Hackman out and about. And it's literally just like the worst photographs of him eating a Wendy's chicken sandwich in the vehicle.
No.
He doesn't look anything like Gene Hackman either.
Oh, right,
It was sad to see, kind of, but he's still around. Anyway. Doesn't matter now. We're not doing the 6th film, probably, and we already picked.
Those are 2 very topical ones. I don't know if we'll save them for next year.
We already picked Blood Diamond. So, okay. Vin, thank you so much for watching these films. Yep. Thanks for stopping by. Folks at home, we'll run it down one more time. We have the animated The Hobbit with a 65%, Conan the Barbarian with a 70%, Dungeons & Dragons with a 13%, Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves with a 52%, and finally, Tetris with a 60%. Folks, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week on the Daily Ratings Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, if you would, could you give us a good rating or tell a friend about us? If you're wondering if a film is worth a watch, or if you'd just like to see more movie ratings from Vince, be sure to stop by thedailyratings.com, where we have our ever-expanding catalog of films. Also, if you found value in the podcast or our site, become a producer and go to the donations tab on thedailyratings.com. You can donate whatever amount of value you feel you received from us. We're looking to build this into something large and great, but also be independent from those corporate sponsors, so we greatly appreciate any support from you all. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast.